going on. There were U.S. Special Forces operating out of Uganda, coming in by C-130s across Uganda into the Congo. Barrick Gold was up there mining for its gold up in the north where there were no military activities. And all the time we were given the story that the refugees in the Congo were actually Interahamwe and FAR. They had committed genocide. We had already dehumanized them, so it was easy to write them off completely, and that's exactly what was done. They were left for the killing, and they were butchered all the way across the Congo. They were sent back to Rwanda, and then when they were sent back to Rwanda, they were butchered on return in Rwanda. There's plenty of examples of people's stories documenting the fact that they were forcibly repatriated. The UN report of October 2010 says that the reason that they possibly can't say that there was genocide by the RPF was that the RPF actually was taking people back to Rwanda. So if they're taking people back to Rwanda, they're taking refugees back to Rwanda and saving their lives, then of course, how could they have a nasty plan to commit genocide in the Congo? That's the argument of the UN report. It's absolute nonsense. The UN report is a complete whitewash. There isn't a single mention of a white individual or white mining company or white military operative. There isn't a single mention of white forces from Belgium, the United States, Israel, or France involved in the Congo. It's a complete whitewash. And at the same time, it's basically saying there's a possibility of genocide having been committed in the Congo by the RPF. Not the UPDF, not Museveni, only the RPF. And the reason they created this caveat that maybe genocide isn't applicable is because the RPF was taking people back into Rwanda as refugees and giving them a new life in Rwanda, which the media since then has told us has, rehabilitated the refugees. It's given them land, it's given them homes, it's created the Gakacha system which tries them. It's got more women in power in Rwanda than any other country in Africa. This is nonsense. It's just nonsense across the board. There's disappearing going on, people in prison in Rwanda who were taken back in 1996 when this happened, when the refugees were bombed in eastern Congo. The people that were accused of being FAR in the Congo, this is an FAR. This is an Interahamwe. This 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy in the Congo is accused of being FDLR, the Forced Democratic Liberation, Rwandan Democratic Liberation Forces who were in the Congo, who committed genocide in Rwanda, fled to the Congo, and now for the last 16 years have been trying to take Rwanda back by force. Nothing about that story is true. The kid's 10 years old. He's got a gun in his hand. He's smoking cigarettes. There's people keeping him in power in Congo. But the FDLR is not the problem in Congo, just like Joseph Kony is not the problem in Uganda. It's the Museveni government that's the problem. That's the evil. And it's the Kagame government that's the evil. And these guys, the whole narrative is the FDLR are committing atrocities in the Congo. You just have to mention the FDLR or mention the Interahamwe, and American minds go blank. They go goo goo gaga. If you've got a Rwandan person who survived the genocide in Congo or Rwanda, and they're a Hutu and they're in America, they're repeatedly, over and over, subject to this American form of questioning of their identity because they're alive and because they're a Hutu from Rwanda, regardless of how old they are, because the media dehumanized the Rwandan Hutu people through Hotel Rwanda and Sometimes in April and the other films that were created that are absolute nonsense. The problem with Sometimes in April is it was produced by Raoul Peck, who also produced the film Lumumba, which is a fantastic film about Lumumba, but he got it absolutely wrong on Rwanda. And Hotel Rwanda as well. Moving right along, killer songs produced by David G. McNeil, New York Times Magazine, 2002. There were killer songs. There was, of course, you're sitting there wondering maybe, how could this possibly be? Because I know that there was this thing called the RTLM, the Radio Television des Mille Colonies, etc., that was producing this hate propaganda telling the Hutus to kill the Tutsis. Well, the RTLM was one of the many radio stations going on at the time, was actually on some level advising the Hutus where the RPF was going to be and how they're going to be killed. It was also saying, defend your country, rise up and defend your country. And you can imagine that if the Canadians had, a few Americans had fled the United States and gone to Canada, and suddenly decided they were going to come back and seize power, and they attacked your hometown, and somebody was telling you to fight back against them, you might take up arms and do so. That's exactly what happened here. The Radio Muhabura was the Rwandan Patriotic Front's version of the RTLM, producing hate radio. And it began with tracks produced in Washington, D.C. by some American officials, produced in Kinyarwanda, distributed to the Tutsi diaspora in the United States, in Belgium. And they made their way into Rwanda, and they were distributed into Rwanda. And the whole conflict was whipped up by the United States, by Belgium, by Roger Winter from the U.S. Committee for Refugees, and by this Mossad agent, David Kimchi. And the media can find all these examples of killer songs. And sure, it said that, but it's completely taken out of context. It's completely taken out of context. You can read about the Rwandan media and stuff, but you don't ever read about Royal Dutch Shell directors supporting Paul Kagame. Those are the white guys, I think. So the Hutus marched into the Congo to escape. These are women carrying everything they got on their backs. And they were persecuted and hunted over and over and over, and they're still being hunted. These are not the problem in the Congo. The whole narrative about the victims versus killers, good versus evil, it's all turned completely upside down, exactly as it has been in Darfur, in Uganda. It's done everywhere, by some means or other. The media, the propaganda system is very deceptive. This guy went to school in Dar es Salaam, University of Dar es Salaam, with Yoweri Museveni in the 1970s. He was also close friends with Paul Kagame, and they were all close friends with John Garang, the leader of the Sudan People's Liberation Army. Leader of the SPLA, John Garang, also was a student of a place called the School of the Americas. They were all friends with Meles Zenawi, the president of Ethiopia, who also went to the University of Dar es Salaam. They plucked this guy out of a bar in Dar es Salaam, Laurent Kabila, and they put him at the head of this movement called the Alliance for the Democratic Liberation of Congo Zaire in 1996, which was a Pentagon operation. And they all marched into Congo, and they claimed that he was the leader of this Zairean movement that was finally overthrowing Mobutu. And that's how we took back Congo. But behind Museveni was Tony Buckingham on the far right. Tony Buckingham and these guys are military special operations forces who founded private military companies like Executive Outcomes. And this one is Sandline International. Sandline International is the private military company behind the oil company operating under Lake Albert, where those little lakes are, the one that I told you about before, which is called Heritage Oil and Gas. And this is who is behind the war in the Congo as well, on some level. You have malicious fighting, but you also have mercenary companies. You have Halliburton, who built bases. Subsidiary Brown and Root built bases in Rwanda in 1994-95. You had these guys marching into the Congo, backing. But all we got from the media was this kind of thing. Whitewashed, again, with sexual subliminal sexuality. Now, you can argue that, well, advertising can appear in all kinds of stories, and it's just an accident this one appeared on the back of a story about the Congo. And my argument is, I don't care if it's an accident or not. It's advertising, it's for sale, it's selling a different thing, and it's conditioning the American public to forget about those racist savages wearing bathroom fixtures in the Congo. I'm just going to skip ahead now. You can get an idea of Rwanda's huge stake in Congo war. Finally, it was exposed by I can't see who it is. I think it was Howard French, but anyway, back side of this, you just have to hold the paper up a little bit and read in the sun. You're getting those images that are affecting you on a very subliminal level. That's what advertising is: sexual subliminality, subliminal sexuality. Anyway, the media, the stories are bullshit to begin with, and so the Hutus were butchered. The butchery has gone on in Rwanda. The killing in the Congo is just off the face of the earth in terms of the kinds of killing, where it's gone on. There are documented cases of genocide. The Lendus and the Hima people in Ituri, the genocide against the Mbuti people in Ituri by the Movement for the Liberation of Congo, John Pierre Bemba. John Pierre Bemba is close to these guys from South Africa. He's close to people from Portugal. I've made all these connections in some of my reporting. All these names that are never mentioned in these whitewashing stories about war in Central Africa. Howard French. Howard French published a book, Africa, A Continent for the Taking. It's another whitewash. The thing about Howard French is he's an African American, and he was there when the Hutus were being butchered in the Congo. He saw it, and he knew in his heart this was wrong. He knew in his heart there was a different story going on, and he made an effort to tell that story by sending his reportage back to the New York Times editors. He told me that the New York Times editors then sent him cables and said, this is what's going on, and then they published what they wanted. Howard French continued to fight with the editors to try to get them to tell the truth about the Hutus being butchered in the Congo. But he only did so on a certain level because he moved on. He stayed with the New York Times. He kept working for them. He sold his soul. He went on to become the bureau chief in Beijing for the New York Times. He published his little book, which doesn't mention Maurice Templespan, and if it does, it's a whitewash again. And he knows perfectly well who Maurice Templespan is. Maurice Templespan runs Tiffany Company. Diamonds. Those are Templespan diamonds. Saks Fifth Avenue. What is she wearing for sale here? Nothing. She's not wearing any clothing. She's not wearing pantyhose. She's not wearing anything. What exactly is for sale? Tells the advertisers, look, we're reporting about the Congo, but we aren't going to touch the fact that you've got all these subsidiary countries and the diamond networks shipping the diamonds out of the Congo. We just want you to know, Mr. Templespan, that your markets in the Congo are safe. That's what that's saying. It's code. Advertising, media. It sounds like conspiracy theory, but if you really think about it, it's not conspiracy theory at all. The tanks in the Congo, sent in by RPF. A different kind of a picture of the war in the Congo. And these are the victims. Their Africa problem is they're Africans, they're savages, they have disease. We don't want disease over here. Our problem is them. Our problem is they're Africans. Our problem is disease gets on airplanes and those microbes travel across the ocean. We need to watch out for those Africans. Their problem is they're Africans. Our problem is them. That's what this story says. This was at the height of the killing of the Hutu refugees in March 1997. Well, the man in the back here who survived this was marching across the Congo, absolutely running for his life. We're eating this stuff without asking why. Finally, the refugees can go home because Rwanda wants them to come home, and they should go home. And there was some nasty Interahamwe in the refugee camps anyway, you know, patrolling those camps and brutalizing aid workers. And, you know, this narrative is so twisted. They didn't make it home. They were intercepted, butchered at the border. They were tracked down and hunted. They're in prison today, people that were shipped home. And many of them just didn't make it home because they turned away from Rwanda knowing perfectly well they had no chance, because from October 1st, 1990, all they'd known is butchery by the RPF in Rwanda of Hutu people and Tutsi people.